Since its initial release in Japan in 1996, the Pokémon trading card game, TCG, has captivated fans worldwide with its artwork and gameplay. Over the years, the TCG has introduced various types and mechanics to mirror the video games and maintain excitement among players. Among these changes, the introduction of Fairy and Dragon-type cards in the early 2010s stands out as a notable attempt to enrich gameplay. While Dragon-type cards have persisted and continue to play a prominent role in the TCG, Fairy-type cards were removed in 2020, a decision that has left fans wondering why this beloved type faded from the game and is unlikely to return. The complexity of types in the Pokémon TCG. The Pokémon TCG's type system is a crucial mechanic that categorizes cards and provides variety in gameplay. In the video games, each Pokémon has one or more of the 18 elemental types, with specific strengths, weaknesses, and moves associated with each type. However, the TCG simplifies this mechanic by condensing these types into 10 categories, with only 11 types being present at the TCG's height before Fairy's removal. This simplification causes a disconnect for Pokémon that, in the games, belong to types that are unrepresented or awkwardly categorized in the TCG. This issue is especially visible with certain cards that do not align well with any of the TCG's existing types. For instance, Fezandipiti X is a Poison/Fairy Pokémon in the games, but because neither Poison nor Fairy is available in the TCG, it is categorized as either Dark or Psychic type, creating a mismatch in weaknesses and strengths. This approach of consolidating types helps streamline the game, but it can feel arbitrary and limit certain Pokémon's thematic identities. The rise and decline of Fairy-type cards. In 2012, Dragon-type cards were introduced to the TCG, expanding the game's type system for the first time in over a decade. While the type's initial gimmick, weakness to colorless types, made it a bit niche, it eventually became a staple. A year later, in 2013, Fairy-type cards debuted in the first Pokémon X and Y set, primarily to support Xerneas, a Generation 6 legendary Fairy-type Pokémon. Fans of Fairy types were thrilled to finally see their favorite Pokémon in the TCG, but Fairy types struggled to establish themselves in the competitive landscape. The type's limited support hindered its competitive presence. Between 2013 and 2019, only 286 Fairy-type cards were released, many of which were duplicates. Furthermore, Fairy types received far fewer EX and GX cards than other types, which made it challenging to create strong Fairy-type decks. For instance, Fairy-type EX and GX cards totaled only 16 over the years, and many saw limited play outside of specific strategies, such as the Gardevoir GX deck. This scarcity of support, coupled with minimal competitive presence, restricted the type's appeal beyond collectors. When the Fairy type was officially phased out in 2020, it coincided with a reorganization of the TCG's type system. With no new cards and its basic energy removed from play, Fairy-type cards became unplayable in standard formats, and Pokémon that were Fairy-type in the games were absorbed into other categories like Psychic. This decision essentially retired the type, placing Fairy alongside Dark-type energy as one of only two types to be removed from the TCG. The interplay between Dragon and Fairy types. The relationship between Dragon and Fairy types in the video games adds another layer to this story. In the games, Fairy-type Pokémon have an advantage over Dragon types, which helped balance the powerful Dragon-type Pokémon in battles. When Fairy-type was introduced to the TCG, it provided a necessary counter to Dragon-type cards, preventing Dragon decks from becoming too dominant. Despite this balance in the games, the TCG often leaned on simplifications for gameplay, and Dragon types continued to receive support long after Fairy types were removed. Interestingly, the TCG still occasionally reintroduces mechanics and types for nostalgic appeal, such as EX Pokémon returning as X and Trainers Pokémon expected in 2025. However, the reintroduction of Fairy-type cards is unlikely because other types have since absorbed Fairy-type roles, and an entirely new Fairy gimmick would be necessary for their return. Fairy-type's legacy in the TCG. Fairy-type's removal left a gap for fans, particularly collectors, as it offered unique cards that became harder to find. The Sylveon and Gardevoir Tag Team GX card, for example, remains one of the most expensive Fairy-type cards today, valued at over $200. With the Fairy-type's retirement, these rare cards hold increased sentimental and collector value, serving as mementos of a type that, while short-lived, had a dedicated following. Despite its short lifespan, Fairy-type has a lasting legacy in the Pokémon TCG as a rare addition that brought a unique aesthetic and niche strategy to the game. Fairy-types are remembered fondly by fans who enjoyed the thematic ties and counterbalance it offered to the powerhouse Dragon-types.